The C63 has came a long way, but she's still got a long way to go. But right now, I won't be going anywhere far because, well, it doesn't start or run. But the Mercedes does look a lot better from when I first bought her, at least. She was in a pretty bad accident, which we kind of worked out it was probably from a police chase, all the airbags deployed, and well, just in a generally bad way. And well, she still is in a bad way, but that's what I've been doing over the past month, rebuilding her and then installing this Black Series body kit. Now in the last video, before we started trying to work out the starting issue and why it wouldn't start without jumping the connection between the starter motor and the electrics of the car, we installed this bonnet. And the one thing, well, the two things that were missing from this bonnet was the little parts that attach the strut to the bonnet so I don't have to hold it up with my hand. And that little part looks like these little things here, which actually turn out they're built into the standard Mercedes bonnet. And this one is an aftermarket one, so it doesn't have these in. So I've had to order these off eBay, only a couple of quid, but it looks like we're gonna have to riv nut them in. So you guys have seen me use a riv nut before on the wide arch kits. All it does is push a rivet in which has thread in it so you can then thread something in it. So we've got to drill out a hole big enough for the rivet, make sure it fits, and then use the riv nut gun to press it in. Come alive in the nighttime, something about how we dance. And there we go. And we should now be able to fit the little ball joint for the hydraulic strut. And there it is, first job complete. Nice and easy one to start the day with. One job done. Now the bonnet holds itself up, which is always good news. Now onto the biggie, getting this thing started again, and hopefully it starts properly. I just hope I know how all these wires go back together. And if you look right deep in here, there is connectors which are right at the bottom, which are going to be really difficult to connect up to the sort of transfer box that is supposed to go there. And this is the transfer box. Well, I assume it's called the transfer box that is supposed to go there. It's full of fuses, connectors, and all sorts of bits, but what's inside this is stopping that from starting. So we've sort of gathered that this side is the electric part of the car, and then this part here is for the starter motor. This wire which goes onto the top of that leads to the starter motor, and we're not getting power from the electric side to the starter motor side, and that is because of this pyrotechnics thing here. When you remove the cap, you can see the connection from this tab here to that tab there. Well, it's been broken, and that happens when the airbags deploy. Now we have a new pyrotechnics fuse, 40 quid off eBay. I'm going to pop this all back together if I remember how, and fingers crossed it starts. Let's do it. And if it looks like I know what I'm doing, well, I apologise. I literally don't. But I'm hoping whatever I'm doing fixes the start issue. Now the beep I'm getting from the multimeter is good news. It now shows that there's current moving from one side of the pyrotechnics fuse to the other, which is exactly what we need. But that was the easy part. Actually putting it back in was so difficult and time consuming and really fiddly. There was a lot of wires that needed reconnecting up, and they were in really difficult and awkward places. But hopefully they're all in the right spot, but we'll soon find out. So that terminal box is now connected. That was fiddly as hell, and I do not want to be doing that again. And fingers crossed it should start at its own accord now, but there is one thing that's kind of worrying me. In the last video, we scanned the fault codes on the C63, and we found we had 2 faulty crash sensors which sit on the crash bar, and then 2 faulty pre-tensioners which are on the front seat belts. Now I don't think that's enough for us to re-trip the pyrotechnics fuse, and if we do re-trip the fuse, that means we have to do that all over again. But I don't think it will be, but I could be wrong. We should now be getting a reading from this side to this side. Well, I hope we are. And we are. So we are getting some kind of signal across from that side to that side now, whereas before we wasn't. Here we go. Yes! We're back in action! working and running, £40 fix, and a lot of labour. Now there's still so many faults still to get through on the Merc, but the one we're going to attack now is this ABS fault, which we found in the previous video was caused by a wheel speed sensor on the front left. Also, when I hired up the car, it seems we've sprung a leak, but we'll get to that. Now this wheel speed sensor is a crucial part of the ABS system, which keeps you safe in the real world. But I tell you what's been keeping me safe in the virtual world, a VPN tool called Surfshark, who have sponsored today's video. And VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. That means it encrypts all the data sent via the internet, so no one can steal your passwords, view your online messages, or see what you're doing online. Wow, that's amazing. It is. Now, if you think public Wi-Fi is safe, then you're wrong. Public Wi-Fi is a gold mine for hackers, but not when using Surfshark. And that's not the only thing it can do. Check this out. Sometimes I think back to when buying the C63 and I wish I would have just ran from it, just like Forrest Gump. But if I wanted to watch Forrest Gump in the UK, it's not possible on Netflix. But with Surfshark, I can change my browsing location to somewhere like Australia, go back onto Netflix, give it a refresh, and there we go, Forrest Gump is available. So to get Surfshark today, click the link in the description box below. And with that link, you'll get 83% off Surfshark, plus an extra 3 months for free. And there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there is literally no risk. So we have a new wheel speed sensor installed on that side, so that's secured that fault. Now it's onto the crash sensors on the front. Now I've replaced this one, which is just behind the crash bar on there. I've just got to replace this one, which is behind the crash bar here. Now the job for the crash sensors is pretty self-explanatory. To tell the car when it's involved in an accident so it knows when to deploy airbags. And the blue crash sensor that you can see is not communicating with the car. But these were the crash sensors that were on the crash bar when I bought it. So perhaps they're from a different model, whereas the green ones, they're from Mercedes, so they should work. Now when I pop back onto the diagnostic tool, we do have another fault with the airbags. And it's saying that the driver's side seatbelt tensioner is at fault. Now, although the seatbelt hasn't locked out, it still could recognise that it's been in a crash. And there's only one way to sort this. Well, actually, there's 2 ways to sort it, but we're going to do it the proper way and remove the seatbelt and refit a new one. Now, I mentioned there's 2 ways, and the other way is pretty dodgy. I've seen people put resistors in the seatbelt connectors to cancel the light and still use the old seatbelts. The seatbelt is out, and that's what was causing the final issue with the airbags. Even though it's not sort of locked out, I think it does recognise that there was a crash and, well, it needs to be reset. And I was going to send it off to be reset and then I can pop it back in, but when you can find one on eBay for just £45, it's not worth the bother. I'm just going to buy this one. So I think parts like this are the sole reason to why cars like that go down quite a lot in value. This is all-round brake discs and pads for the C63. Now bear in mind this is a wear and tear part, and the parts that you're gonna have to replace eventually on any car, and the cost for all of these, and this was at a good price as well, was £996. But this has pretty much been a similar story for this whole car. Every single part that has been specially made for the C63 has been extortionately priced. So you're okay actually buying the car, but maintaining it is a different story, hence why a lot of them end up in a bad way like mine. Removing brake pads on these types of calipers is pretty easy, but before we do that I'm going to remove the disc, and to do that I've got to remove the caliper. With the caliper out the way, I can undo the torque screw holding the disc on, and we're just about ready to fit the new disc. Wait, hold up. We may have found a reason why these were £1,000, because they are floating discs. Look how sick they are. I hope they actually fit. They're the ones that just came off. Do you know what's probably the best way to find out?
Just put them on.
Yeah. So we lined up the new floating discs to the C63, which we think are a little bit thicker than the standard ones. And with them being a little bit thicker means there's modification needed. The dust/heat shield behind the disc was rubbing on the new thicker floating disc. So that had to be removed straight away. With the heat shield removed, I could then pop back on the caliper, start removing the pins so I can pull out the old brake pads and refit the new brake pads.
I'm all in, so load up the dice, so heavy, the way that you roll.
Now Now, one thing you may notice is that the red caliper is pretty battered and bruised. And I was actually thinking about painting the caliper whilst I was doing the brakes here, but I still haven't decided on a colour for the car. And because I haven't made that decision, I couldn't decide what colour to paint the calipers yet. So maybe we'll save that for when the car gets painted. But let me know, what colour would you think of to paint the C63? Now, moving on to the rear, it's pretty similar to the front, but just a smaller version. The only difference for the rear, it actually has a handbrake inside the brake disc, just like the BMWs. And to be quite frank, it is a rubbish design. And when I took the disc off, I could clearly see the state of the handbrake shoes were atrocious and they need to be replaced. So they are on order and we're going to have to take it all back off to do it again. But for now, my job was to get the rear brakes on, and that's exactly what I did. Oh my days, how sick does new brake discs look on the C63? It's almost like putting new wheels on your car. They're absolutely huge and they just look so good. That floating disc. How big are these? Look, that is the size comparison to my hand. Now the floating discs are on. It's a little bit of an upgrade and it's just getting me more and more excited to drive this thing. The C63 is categorized as a category S car, and you may see some cars categorized as a category N. Category S meaning structural and category N meaning non-structural, but what they categorize as structural damage can be anything, even suspension damage. But the good news, both can be put back on the road. And all it needs in the UK to be put back on the road is an MOT test. Years ago they used to have to undergo a special inspection, but they've got rid of that, probably not for the better. There's still a few things holding this car back from passing an MOT test. 1 being tyres, 2 possibly being the handbrake, and 3, no front seat belt. But regardless of all those things, I'd still like it to look a little bit more presentable before it goes for the MOT test. So now we're on to a few more cosmetic stuff. Another thing that we're missing as well is the front parking sensors, along with the wiring loom for the front parking sensors as well. And if you remember, we referenced the rear bumper to drill the holes in the rear bumper to where the parking sensors were. We don't have a front bumper for any reference, so it's going to be pretty hard to know where we're going to drill the holes for the front bumper. But we'll worry about that when we get to it. But for now, let's crack on with the cosmetic stuff. Now, the main thing I want to attack is the gap between the body kit and the car. This needs to look pretty smooth, and the way we're going to do that is with body filler. And I'm talking like I know what I'm doing. I have absolutely no experience in bodywork, but at some point in my life I had no experience in wrapping a car, and the only way I learned is from giving it a try myself. And to be honest, I feel like that's the best way. But if any of you guys see where I'm going wrong with this, then please let me know in the comment section below. I've just applied a bit of body filler between the body and the body kit, and then slowly, bit by bit, I'm using some sandpaper to sand it down to make it nice and smooth, starting off with some pretty harsh 120 grit. But this car will be going to the body shop afterwards, so if I could just get it just about right, then hopefully they could touch it up for me. Now, if you can see here, which is really difficult, there's a tiny dent in the rear quarter of the car. So I'm just going to prep this a little bit, apply some filler, and hopefully get that dent out. And maybe sanded it a little too much because it's gone down to metal, but you live and you learn. With the workshop looking in an absolute state, there's some more things on the front bumper that we're missing. The front canards. These canards come standard on the original Black Series, so I thought they needed to go on mine. It was pretty difficult to line them up and get them perfect each side, but I think I just about smashed it before drilling holes in the bumper. There's no turning back now. With the holes drilled, we're going to do exactly the same as what we did at the start of the video with the rib nuts. That way I can be sure that these canards are never coming off. And there they go, they are on. If anyone ever tells me they're wonky, it will drive me mad because I spent a lot of time trying to get them straight. Okay, so this C63 is really starting to push the boundaries now. There's a reason why this is in my hand. So we'll get onto the bodywork later, but we're making progress with that. But after I plugged in the new wheel speed sensor there, I was still getting the fault on the dashboard. I cleared the fault with the diagnostic tool and it still didn't go. So I thought, well, let's drive it around the car park and then see if it starts to recognize the wheel speed then, and hopefully take the fault off the dash. It didn't. Now the wheel speed sensor sort of hovers above an ABS ring, and when that ABS ring is turning with the drive shaft, it's getting a signal to the ABS sensor and then sending that to the car to know what speed that wheel is turning. Now we don't have a problem with the ABS ring, we know that because the diagnostic tool is telling us that we've got an electrical fault, which brings me on to this. You can just about see where the wire goes up and then into the car there. That part of the wire is fine, but then I've removed all this, which covers over the ECU, and sort of found that it comes out around here. And guess what? The wire is completely split. I tried to get a camera in there, but I don't know if you guys can see it. You can just about see it here. They are a nightmare to get to. The best part about that is, one, I don't exactly know how that's happened. Two, I don't even know where those wires go to. And three, it's going to be really difficult to get to, and it looks like we're going to have to remove that black box, which we did at the start of the video, which was an absolute nightmare. Next up, the oil leak. This is going to be super annoying because if you remember, we took all of this down, the subframe, the steering rack and everything to replace the broken sump and a lot of other components, and if it's coming from any of them, it's gonna push the limits. Let me get the GoPro out, it might be easier. So up here at the top, it looks pretty damn wet. Now we replaced this part of the sump here, and this part actually looks all right, but the trail of oil is sort of coming down, and it's quite difficult to tell. I don't know whether it's the actual main sump where it connects to the actual block of the engine and that's where it's leaking, but it's very difficult to tell. It looks the most wet around this area here. And then moving over to this side, well, this side I don't think is actually oil. This bit here, it looks green, which I think is power steering fluid coming from possibly one of the pipes. Now the bodywork is by no means finished. This is going to go to Colourcraft when I've finally got this thing together to sort of fix, touch up and basically fix the mess that I've made. But I don't know, it might not actually be too bad. So now between the body kit and the car, there is a line of filler joining the gap, so there's literally no gap in between. Yes, I've gone down to metal here, probably shouldn't have, but well, you live and you learn. This is going to stay inside anyway, so there's no chance of rust. Now before on the inside of the door, it used to have a lip. Now it's nice and smooth, full of filler. It does all need touching up and going down with some fine grit, definitely, and probably a lot more. But now the door shuts as well are all nice and smooth, and the door does open and close as it should. There's still a fair bit of work to do with the body lines on the front though. So the gap between the wing and the bonnet, yes, the bonnet is closed now, but we need to build this up with perhaps fiberglass or filler just to make the body line look a lot better, because it's a lot smaller at this end and then it gets bigger towards the end. And then there's lots of other little things like parking sensor, washer covers, grills to go in here, towing eye covers, and this has all got to get done before we get onto the performance side, which is my sort of motivation at the minute because I can't wait to drive it. So will the C63 be the car that breaks me? But I don't know, I love a challenge and I'm so thankful that all you guys are supporting me and supporting the build along the way. Thanks so much for watching this video. Hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button if you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.